Hello all, it is the 5th of November, 2023. It's a very pretty fall day, upper 60s and sunny and warm, relatively. So I just finished doing some raking of leaves in the yard, but I don't want to waste this whole day just doing work in the yard. So what I'm going to do today is attempt to reattach this dash, the metal part, to the firewall, to the body of the car. It shouldn't be too hard, I hope. It better not be because I have to get that done. Um, I guess I need to get this a little closer here. Earlier, I had said I was going to leave this thing hanging until I got the brake booster back in, but I realized that doesn't make sense because once the brake booster is in place under the hood, it gets in the way of putting the power steering hoses back in place, which are the fittings are underneath the brake booster. And since I'm missing one of the hoses, since I damaged it, I can't reuse it. Uh, I am I can still get the brake booster up here. It's a little more work, uh, and also, well, the main reason is because if that brake booster is in place, then it becomes very, very difficult to get the rag joint, the flex joint between the steering column and the steering gear in place. So that's really the main reason. But before I can get to the steering column, I first have to put the dash back in place. And as I showed in the previous video, I fixed the square bolts that are on the other side of this panel here, that hold up the steering column. So that was the whole reason I took this down. And the other thing I was reminded too is that these vent connector things slide, so that way I don't have to worry so much about getting the vents lined up, the defroster vents lined up in the holes, because once I get them close, I'll be able to just slide that connector part. Now the flex ones here, I do have to reconnect before I can put it up there, but that's not a big deal. My oldest son, said maybe you should think about doing the heater core at the same time. And it was a good thought, but it turns out in this car, the heater core is under the hood, very easily accessible. That's one thing Ford got right on this design, so I don't have to worry about that in the future. I am going to replace the heater core, but that's very easy to do under the hood. So my next step is to attempt to lift that metal dash back up in place and start putting the bolts on top in place to hold it while I work on getting everything else connected. Here's the parking brake assembly that will need to be reconnected. The little hose that releases the parking brake is disconnected, and of course I'll plug that back in. Hopefully I won't miss anything. There really isn't that much to put in this back. So I'm also hopeful when I go look at this parts car in Kentucky that the wiring harness is still intact, so I can simply cut off this same plug on that wiring harness and then just splice it together here, so I don't have to worry too much about that. And that's it for now. I'm going to backtrack for just a second here. On that steering gear that I installed on the car yesterday, I made one mistake. Luckily, it's not a critical mistake. I'm pointing out the bolts there because I didn't read the instructions that came with the kit. Pretty dumb of me. But it turns out I was supposed to have reused the flat washers that are on the old bolts. And I don't know why I didn't do that. I just didn't think about it because they're here, and I'm told that they are supposed to be reused. So fortunately, it won't be too hard to remove one bolt at a time, because that thing is not going to move. And then I'll just put those washers on there. Not a high priority item, but I felt kind of silly that I read the instructions too late to notice that. And the other thing that was kind of funny just now is that I was in my shed looking for the little Ziploc bag for where I would normally put my loose bolts and whatnot. So I was looking for one for the dashboard. Well, I got lazy this time. I actually just left them here on the floor. They're already here. So I felt kind of silly. I broke my own pattern, and then I couldn't find what was already in here. Anyway, moving along. All right, a little bit of progress here. I had to remove one of these little dash pad retaining clips right here in the middle. It was interfering with me getting the dash in place there. And I was able to finally get one 3/8 bolt started on the right side. The left side, I'm having trouble lifting it up high enough to reach, but I'll keep working on that. But before I go any further, I got to make sure all my connections are tight in here. Like here's this vacuum hose for the trunk lid release, and I need to make sure it's plugged in, and that sits fine there. And I got to make sure the defroster vents are connected, so I'm going to reach in there and do that before I tighten the dash up any further, but making progress. All right, I now have all four of the little 3/8 bolts started, all four, so that's a big accomplishment. All the vents are reconnected. One thing I wanted to point out while I was thinking about it is there are two sets of flashers under here. Um, So if you ever need to replace a flasher, either the four-way flasher or the turn signal flasher, they're both under here. And the only way to get to them, I believe, is you'd have to remove that panel that sits here with the clock in it and everything, get that out of the way in order to access that normally. But they both work on this car. And I also wanted to point out this is part of the automatic temperature control. And there's a separate hose that had to be plugged back in here because it works by sucking in air over some kind of sensitive element there. It amazes me that these old cars without modern electronics actually had automatic temperature control, and it actually worked. So anyway, I'm going to finish tightening up those 3/8 bolts on top, put my little retaining thing back here for the dash pad, finish tightening the brackets underneath, and then at that point I think I'm going to be ready to do the steering column. That was really what I was after, is getting that steering column back in place. And here are my new bolts here waiting to be used. At this point I'm ready to reinstall the steering column. So what I'm in the process of doing is I read this somewhere, but I bought this new bushing. It's in this pot of water. You may not be able to see it, but it's a bushing that's going to go right here. It's a shift linkage bushing that was missing from the steering column. So I bought one online, and the idea was to soften up the bushing by putting it in hot water. So I brought the water almost to a boil on the stove. Here's the bushing right there. I also lubricated the column itself, the hole where this is going to go, with some Vaseline. So I'm hoping this is going to go in relatively easy. We're about to find out. So I'm going to put it here and use some pliers to hopefully just squeeze it in the hole there and see what happens. I don't know if maybe I'll be better off tapping it with my rubber mallet. That might work better. Let's see what happens here. Oops. Well, that just popped right off. And it's deforming in the process, so that didn't work too well. I hope this is the right size. It almost looks like it's not. Okay, so I'm gonna have to work on that. I don't know, maybe I need to work on the bottom parts here and try to get that through somehow. I don't know, but that didn't work too well. So I'm gonna keep working on that, see how I do. All right, I have to assume I got the wrong size bushing, because that is definitely not going to fit in that hole. And it's deformed now. Even if I was able to get it in, I don't think it would work. It's just obviously too big for the hole. So I will work on getting a different bushing, probably from a different source that specializes in Lincolns, like Mark II Enterprises, and try that. The good news is this doesn't stop me from inserting the steering column in the car, because I can do this from under the hood, especially before I put the brake booster in, which I don't have yet anyway. So that's going to be my next step, to put the steering column back in the car. All right, I'm having a lot of trouble getting the steering column through the firewall, mainly because the rag joint's interfering with also putting enough space to get the gear shift lever through. I'm not sure how I pulled it out, but I can make plenty of room just by taking the rag joint off. I'll be able to put it back on the other side without a problem. And I'm going to use my new universal joint socket that I bought from Napa online, or ordered it online since I couldn't find it in the store. So I'm glad I have that now. Oh baby, that thing is tight. There it goes. Okay. Okay. And it's off. So now it should go through the hole in the firewall a whole lot easier. We'll see how that goes. All right, as predicted, I got the steering column shift lever through the firewall much easier without the rag joint in place, and without the master cylinder brake booster in place. I've got plenty of room to get the rag joint installed, and it only fits a certain way on the steering column. It's not reversible, which is good. Can't put it on backwards. I seriously doubt the steering wheel is going to be straight across anymore, but I can fix that later. Not worried about that. So the next step is to install the rag joint and connect it to the steering gear. All right, I considered the day a success. I've gotten the steering column reattached to the steering gear. It took quite a bit of work getting the rag joint connected on both ends, but I did get it back in place. Used my new socket, and even better, the work that I did with the square nuts inside the dash worked out beautifully. These new bolts that are up here, where's it? Right there, that's one of them. They hold real nicely, so I'm very pleased about that. And I just realized there's a plastic spacer that's supposed to go up there, so I haven't tightened them all the way down. But I'm gonna end the day because there's a ball game on TV I want to watch, and I need to clean up. So that's it for the day.